Colonel Branford. It's been a long time. I the reunion. I think the reunion, 10-year reunion. So it's been at least 7 years.
Yes.
Uh, so we have Colonel Branford, Karim Branford, from the Texas National Guard, with us today. Um, Colonel Branford, when I met him, he was a freshly minted ROTC program out of Princeton.
Yes.
And you came into Iraq as at least you came to our company as a replacement platoon leader.
I did.
And right now you got 20 years in the Army, and you're still going strong.
Still going.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it's awesome to have you here. You know, before we get into the Bakuba fight, what I'd like to do is, just talk about some of your upbringing, what inspired you to join the Army, who some of those influential figures were. I also like to hover around your experience in the ROTC pipeline,
Yeah.
because it would be great to be able to sit there and inspire some young man or woman that is maybe contemplating the military. And I think obviously everyone has a story, but everybody's story touches different people, right? So I would like to hover in that area just for a little bit and talk about some of your ROTC experience, and then also the NCO officer relationship as you move through your military career. I think that's another cool point. And so with that said, do you mind taking a few minutes and where'd you grow up? Mom and dad, what did they do for a living? How'd you get interested in the school? Yeah, we'll just kind of freestyle from there. Sound good?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. I mean, again, thank you for putting all this together. Really enjoy you keeping us together and telling our story. But first, I grew up, born and raised in New York City. Both my parents came from the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago. They came to the United States. My dad worked for the United Nations, which is, you almost think, almost counter of what I did with my career. And then my mother worked as a teacher for the United Nations International School. So,
really? What did she teach?
So she taught middle school humanities. She taught in the Queens branch. There's two branches, one in Queens, one in Manhattan. So it was kind of weird growing up as a kid, having your mother as a teacher.
You were going to be slacking in academics, were you?
No, definitely was not able to, and got to do also schoolwork over the summers sometimes. So, but they both instilled in me from a pretty young age just work ethic, continue to strive, work on everything you're doing, try to not be an expert, but be very proficient in what you do. So kind of had that in me from an early age.
Yeah. Parent as a school teacher, that's phenomenal. So what were some of the things you did for fun, academics aside?
Yeah, as a kid, love sports. Playing sports was my biggest thing. Tried all sports when I was younger, but really as I kind of grew up and got into high school, really honed in on two: soccer and track and field. Sprinting, those were my two really competitive. That's where I excelled. Tried the baseball thing, tried basketball, was on JV for a bit, but soccer and track and field is really those were my passions. Even till I was much older, even in my 30s,
Okay.
and now 40s, still doing pickup soccer. So
Really? That's
yeah.
awesome. Very, very good. Very good. When did the military start to enter your thought process for the future?
So I don't know if it was necessarily the military, but when I was in high school, I started having this. I wanted to serve, so I was looking at, really at the time, law enforcement. New York Police Department was kind of what I was thinking. Towards my junior year, we got a new teacher who was prior military service as a history teacher. And just some of the way that he taught the courses, he talked to the students about what he served and everything. I think that maybe planted the seed more of there's more opportunity to serve than just law enforcement. And then when I got to college at Princeton, unbeknownst to me, there was a very small ROTC program to the point where my class commissioned about 8 officers. So when you look at
That is small. Wow.
very small, and that's combined with Rutgers. So it's a very, sorry, not Rutgers, the College of New Jersey. So a very small program. But it kind of started to grow after, obviously, 9/11. You started to see the uptick of individuals joining the ROTC program grow.
So what year did you enter college?
2000.
2000. Okay. So what was some of the highlights as you started your journey with academics and the ROTC pipeline?
So it's when I first started, it was one of my peers in our residential assignment group. He was in the program as well, and he's the one that first kind of told me that, hey, this is an opportunity. And I looked into it, and it was just the tactical. I liked being out in the field, going out and doing training exercise at the Fort Dix over there in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Spent many a weekend training out there, honing, starting to learn the profession. But really, I think it was the professor of military, the PMI, Colonel McCarville, and a Colonel Williams, and then really had strong officer leadership, and then also NCO leadership. And one of the things Master Sergeant Goss and Sergeant Garces told me that I resonated through my career is you have to trust your NCOs. Don't be that officer that thinks you know everything, because the years of experience, their technical, tactical proficiency overshadows everything that you have. And even now, where I'm a point 20 years of service, one of the first things I always go to is I got to talk to my NCOs, figure out from their perspective what makes sense and everything. So,
Did you already, when you went in, were you a contracted cadet, or did you kind of feel things out before you made the full commitment?
I felt things out, and then probably my sister and I debate. So she also went to Princeton with me. She was 2 years ahead of me. I think it was just before 9/11. She says it was a few days after 9/11. But somewhere there in 2001, that's when I actually said, nope, I'm all in. I'm doing this. I'm gonna fully commission as an officer.
Did you have a branch already identified that you wanted to do, or still rolling?
So I had it down to 2. Again, it goes back to the service, and because of my early thoughts of going NYPD, it was either military police or infantry. So those were the 2. Somewhere, can't remember if it was my sophomore or junior year, they take you out to almost like a branch fair where all the different branches are out there, and they kind of talk to you about what they do and everything. And I think at that point, it really solidified to me I wanted to go infantry. For ROTC, you don't get to pick your branch. You get to, based off of how you're doing academics, and in your program, you're selected. So I was fortunate enough. I remember when Colonel McCarville called me and told me I got infantry, and I was just ecstatic because that's eventually what I wanted to do. But that's how I got my
Where did they do that branch event? Was that at Fort Dix?
20 years, almost 20 years ago. I couldn't even tell you where we did it. It would have probably been at Fort Dix, but.
Was there, what really appealed to you with the infantry when you were making that decision process, weighing things out? What was the biggest thing that jumped out at you? Like, yeah, this is why I'm going to go infantry.
Honestly, I think some of it was driven from 9/11 in my mind, and probably in the mind of many young Americans at the time. Infantry is kind of the tip of the spear. You're almost the first ones in, not really the first ones in, but in the conventional army, you're one of the first. And I wanted to be in that position. And then there was also conversations about the leadership schools you go to as an infantry officer, which are a little bit different than some of the other branches have the opportunity to go to. So that was another thing that kind of pushed me towards infantry. Obviously, Ranger School, Airborne School, those types of courses.
Where were you on 9/11?
I was in my dorm room sophomore year, sleeping on my futon. Didn't know what was going on. My sister called me because, again, our dad worked at the United Nations in New York. And Woke up. She said, turn on the TV. Turned it on, saw what was going on. We couldn't get in communication with either of our parents because New York City was almost like a dead zone for cell. And just the not knowing what was going on, watching as the towers were hit, watching as the Pentagon, watching the towers fall. It was just, and being from New York City, it hit home close, and it was just, you could kind of see some of the smoke a little bit. I debated driving into the city, but my sister kind of was like, "Hey, we don't know what's going on. Just stay where you are. We'll figure this out." But
She was the voice of reason, huh?
she has been.
Okay.
So
how did that change what you guys were doing at the ROTC and the environment, if at all?
I don't know if it changed the environment within the program, because I think the product of the ROTC program was to make sure that the cadets were prepared to lead any formation for any event.
Yeah.
So I don't think that had to change much. I think in me, again, like I said, that was kind of the road and the path between wanting MP and infantry of, no, I'm going on this path, and this is what I really want to do. So
I'm glad you chose that path.
I'm glad I did as well.
So you graduate what year?
2004.
2004. What was your next move?
So from Princeton, went back to New York for a couple weeks before I had my infantry officer basic course date. So I did that, said goodbye to my high school friends, my college friends, drove down to Fort Benning, parked up my little Acura Vigor, drove down there.
I remember that Acura.
Yeah.
All right.
Kept it for too long, probably. But drove down to Fort Benning, in processed, and then started my time there at Benning. Infantry officer basic course, had a really good group of guys. I remember Captain Powell, we called him Captain America, former regiment guy, was our platoon tech essentially.
Okay.
Always like taking us on very long runs for PT all the time. And OBC was a great experience. Really started to build those leadership skills, and then obviously after OBC, was put in for mech leaders course. At the time, I was supposed to be slotted for 4th ID. So that's why it was like mech leaders course, then airborne school, and then ranger school before finally graduating ranger school and then coming to Fort Hood at the time.
Did you know anything about mechanized infantry to that point?
I knew nothing. And I've probably forgot more, and it was a great experience, I'll tell you. So not knowing anything about mechanized infantry, and even in OBC, there was 1 or 2 field problems where they bring in Bradleys, but you're not operating them. Obviously, you're just kind of understanding how to maneuver them and everything. But that mechanized leaders course, I think, was a great experience for me as an officer, one, to know what the vehicle I'm about to be in, because you don't get that for any other formations, but then also know how to fight them.
Right.
And bound them and everything. It's not something that you go into much detail in OBC. That's really just the basics of light infantry.
Just breeze right through ranger school?
No, I don't. Not many do. So did not breeze through. Got recycled. I remember having to go back, see the commander. And they go through like, this is why you're recycling and everything. However, I lucked out. Didn't have to do a day one. I got to recycle Florida. It's not a bad place to recycle. Hanging out in Florida, it was during the best ranger competition, so it was a extended stay there. But then on the second time, got through, got my tab, lost a lot of weight.
All right.
So,
and what year was that?
Finally graduated in 2006, right before coming out here to Fort Hood.
Okay. And so when you graduate, were you still on a pipeline for 4th ID, or did they flip the script on you?
So they flipped the script, and they did it with a lot of the officers. We had officers that thought they were going to Hawaii, that thought they were going to Italy, and then when you're finally about to leave Benning, you really get your real order. A lot of people try to talk to branch and
finagle the order, but we're all second lieutenants at the time. We don't have any pull in where we actually want to go. And 4th ID had already deployed, which they were already overseas, as you know. So they said, hey, you're going to 1st Cav now. So got my orders, reported here. Actually had to go up to 1st Cav, G1. From there, they said, okay, well, we think we're going to send you to 3rd Brigade Grey Wolf. And I remember I was sitting there with the S1 at Grey Wolf, and it was myself and another infantry lieutenant looking for assignment. And the S1, can't remember who it was at all. They looked at both of us. I had a tab. The other guy sitting next to me didn't. He ended up going to staff. I ended up going down to 1st the 112 Cavalry.
And what month was that?
That was probably summer time frame. May, June time. So I had missed a lot of the 112 train up, which puts me in a very weird position. And even more so when you think when you're getting assigned to your first platoon, it would be a line platoon. At the time, there was a vacancy. The mortar platoon leader was open, and that's where I got slotted. So having no MLOC qualification, infantry mortar leaders course, having been training my entire time to be a mechanized infantry platoon leader, that's not what the Army had in store for me, and I got assigned as the mortar platoon leader in Hellraiser HHC, 1st the 112 Cav.
Did you have an opportunity to go to JRTC, or had that already been executed and now they're really at the end of their deployment window from stateside to overseas?
So they were at the end of their preparation. The only training that I got to do with the formation was training here at Fort Hood, now Fort Cavazos. Didn't get to do gunnery until we hit Kuwait, which was weird. So we went out and did our gunnery out there. But it was a need of the Army, and there was a vacancy. I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity. Colonel Goins said, you're going to be the mortar PL, figure it out. So got a lot into the books, had great NCOs again, Sergeant Gallardo, Sergeant Sherman as a section sergeant, great NCOs, great team leaders who really, I would say, carried me and made sure that young lieutenant who knew nothing about mortars was able to be relatively successful.
Right on. That's awesome to hear that. It's amazing, and there's a common theme that's starting to bubble to the top with regard to a lot of lieutenants, and it's the churn, right? It's the unit had been over in Iraq, 2-7 infantry. They reflagged to 112. The unit pretty much has about a 50% loss of personnel, right? Because they're ETS and PCS and promotions going to different units. But with a lot of the young platoon leaders that had been coming in, it was post JRTC and closer towards the closure of that train up and more on the deployment side. So mortar platoon leader.
Yes.
Did you do much mortar stuff when you got over into Iraq?
So when we got to Kuwait, was lined out to still be the mortar PL. We would have hot guns. We knew we were going to send a team up to an outpost north of FOB Warhorse, Forward Operating Base Warhorse. So I knew I was going to have tracks kind of dislocated, and then we would have hot guns there on Warhorse for counter fire. However, as things change, when I got to Warhorse, I was told that you would not be the PL, but you will be a night battle captain for the battalion. So I did ask, can I still be a PL and also do the battle captain? So I was afforded that opportunity. I didn't go out with the guys. And then, we also got the additional task of being the personal security detail
4, Charger 6, 5, the SAR Major, and everything else. So the mortars were basically running counter fire in multiple locations, as well as having to provide the PSD for Charger 6. We were augmented with some of the FA battalion service members to kind of plus us up, because we would not have been able to do both those missions with what we had. But for the most part, I got to spend my nights in the TOC, Tactical Operations Center, and then my early mornings, typically about lunchtime, I'd sit with the NCOs, figure out what they were doing. But I was almost removed from being a PL, even though I was a PL in name.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that's a critical position as a night battle captain, because we're running 24/7, right? It's I had no idea you did that. No clue. Which is, you have a unique perspective on the battalion area of operation as the nighttime battle captain, right? And plus building fire plans for the pretty much the whole area, right? So that's what was your take as the night battle captain, and the limited exposure that you had when we first got into Bakuba? What was your view on that? Was it permissive, non-permissive?
So when we did our left seat, right seat with, and I always forget the battalion, but from 4th ID, that was in our AO. One thing that always resonates, that I remember till this day, they talked to us about how there were certain areas in the Diyala province, Bakuba area, that they had determined to be black routes. And they were no longer patrolling those areas because they were too dangerous. And I recall, can't remember if it was Colonel Goins or one of the field grades at the time, basically saying, that's not how we're going to operate. We're going to go back to some of these areas that 4th ID had elected not to go into, and we're going to secure and assist the people. So having that in the back of my mind, I would say it was we didn't know what we were getting into. There were parts of the city that we really didn't have much information on, because, again, 4th ID had kind of reined it back a little bit. And it was just, I think for the first few months, it wasn't quiet, but there was nothing catastrophic that had occurred. There had been multiple troops in contact. Again, working with the shadows, the attack helicopters that would come in from 182, having that experience and exposure, as you kind of already talked about, working fires, making sure clearance of fires and all that. The experience I got there was eye-opening. But again, in terms of was it permissible, it was very strange, because it was almost as if we were going into an area that was somewhat unknown. And that kind of, from my perspective, kind of kept me on edge, because that's not what we should have been going into. We should have been going into an area where it was a handoff of, it's relatively not necessarily secure, but hey, this is what the climate of all these areas are.
All the areas. Do you remember ever seeing or hearing about the videos of Al Qaeda just in vehicles openly patrolling and moving about with inside old Bakuba, new Bakuba area? Yeah, that's pretty bizarre that something like that could happen, several kilometers from Fob Warhorse. How long did you spend up in the battalion doing the night battle captain and working with the mortars? Things started to heat up, right? As 112 started to get their sea legs, and they did the relief in place with 4th ID, as the night battle captain, and things started to get into a little bit of a battle rhythm, right? So 4th ID rips out. 112 now has full control of the area of operation. What were some of the indicators that things were starting to shift?
So as I kind of already talked about, we probably for the first, so we got there. I was advon. I think we got there around September. So October, that's where we're starting to see the troops in contact, and then November is where we have our first, unfortunately, fatality, and I think that was almost the first domino. And being in the talk, you were seeing it all, not all the time, but we started to see almost, it seemed like every few weeks there was just another, whether it was a catastrophic vehicle kill or something like that, or a fatality. It seemed to start to ramp up. But we also saw that the companies were taking back ground essentially that had been left vacated previously. So we're seeing kind of that balance.
Yeah. What were some of the discussions at battalion? Like the way the companies were arrayed, you have Alpha Company and Bravo Company, then the engineers and dealer. What were some of the conversations that you were in on when it comes to owning land and troop to task?
Yeah, so with the kind of array of forces, both Alpha and Bravo. So the task organization of the Combined Arms Battalion, two mech infantry, two armor, but they were then task organized so that Alpha and Bravo would have tracks and Charlie and Delta would have a mech infantry. But because Bakuba was, we'll say, the main effort, two companies, both Alpha and Bravo, were put there, divided by the river, and then again with having infantry, so you could actually put boots on ground to saturate the area, versus the armor companies that were pushed more. Their AOs were more on the periphery. And I can't remember if it was Charlie or Dealer that was all the way further south on that main route. And then, interestingly enough, you also had the Scout Platoon, or was given their own AO out there by the Diala Media Center.
Yeah.
That was in the southeast of Bakuba.
Yeah, so down south was that was Charlie Company and Kanbani Sod.
Yeah.
And then dealer. I'm not really sure where what was it? Callis? Does that sound familiar? Callis. I think that was their main area. Yeah, really, really interesting. Were you in the talk when the Brits IP station got overrun?
Oh.
What was happening then?
It was surreal almost, just because we had UAV up at the time, Shadow, just kind of watching as IP left, watching the station get overran, and then knowing that we would have to send troops in to secure it, and not knowing if there was an IED or something left behind afterwards. It was, again, that the experience of watching a lot of the troops in contact engagements, operations. It's very different when you're seeing it and you're removed. You're hearing some of the traffic, you're seeing it happen, but you're not there. It's a strange feeling.
Yeah, and like there were several other things that happened, right? So you had the Brits IP station that got overrun and blown up. There was also some maneuvers up in like Zaganea area too. Do you recall what happened up in Zaganea, where they had I believe like kidnapped the police chief? And
I don't recall that aspect. I do recall my time in Zaganea, but not that incident specifically.
Yeah, so it was kind of like a coordinated effort where it happened up in Zaganea, and then and it didn't happen absolute simultaneously, but within days of each other, like all these other dominoes were starting to fall. I think a political center, I think the Shia political center got blown up in old Bakuba as well. And it was just one of those things where, we went from a patrolling in Humvees, because that's what the unit we relieved with was doing. So that's what we did. And, you know, obviously after the scouts had gotten hit, Dan Ebarb from 3rd Platoon Bravo Company, you know, got hit, and a couple other IEDs, the EFP that went off on the Alpha Company platoon that was attached to Charlie Company and killed Staff Sergeant Morris. I think that was finally the time where Charger 6 made the call, like, hey, man, we're not cruising around on Bradleys or Humvees anymore. We're going Bradley. Was there any talk of you coming down to a line unit yet?
I don't recall at what point that was brought up as a conversation. I know I had talked to the field grades about, hey, I understand that this is a need as the battle captain. I'm the mortar PL. I don't have a maneuver space like the scouts did. So I understood the decision of pulling in another officer, and kind of, as you mentioned earlier, with all the churn and everything, there were holes to fill. So I understood that. But I did ask them that, hey, if there was ever an opportunity, I would like to go down to the line, because as an infantryman, that's kind of where you want to be, in front of NCOs and soldiers, leading them in combat. Like, that's what I had prepared the last year and a half, 2 years for. And nothing against my experience in the talk. It was a eye-opening experience. I had great leadership, and Captain Morris was in there, who later took Apache as a commander. So Shug taught me a lot as I was sitting there as the night battle captain, and he was the day battle captain. And then obviously 2 great field grades, and obviously Colonel Goins. So I learned a lot while I was there of the AO. But I also had the yearning to be in the field. So,
well, that's pretty, because I'm sure you're hearing all of the different traffic, right? The different contacts, like things are getting real down there. You know, what was your thoughts on that overall? Like, how had you questioned, like, how did we go from, you know, the environment when we did the relief in place with the unit to current state of IP stations getting overrun? What's going in your mind, hearing all of this, just from a young lieutenant's perspective?
And again, it goes back to the comment that stays with me today. We decided to make certain areas black routes, and we no longer patrolled in those areas. So if there was no presence, you're essentially ceding that area to the enemy. And inevitably, like, we knew our leadership was not going to take that same philosophy, and that was not what charges were going to do. So inevitably there was going to be friction, and friction in war, it comes to, so I, knowing that we were taking a different approach, I knew that was inevitable at some point. And then hearing it, and not that I'm searching for combat, because that's not what I was doing, but I was trained to do one thing, and at the time I was like, it was not to sit behind computer screens and monitors and coordinate fires. And great experience. I would not change it for anything, because it taught me a lot. But it's not what I wanted to be doing.
Right on. I don't blame you. And there's not a person that I've talked to throughout my years, to include while going through these interview processes. There's something, there's a mindset, right? Like, that you start when you pick that pipeline of infantry. It's not that we want war, but if war's happening, we don't want to not be part of the solution, right? And the direct part of the solution. So totally get that. So what was the trigger that started you on a trajectory to Bravo Company?
Again, I couldn't tell you what the senior leadership decision was. My assumption, I have not gone back and talked to Moffett, but I think Barron was maybe a little senior. He was the BCO XO at the time. And maybe you could tell me this more. But my assumption is he was senior as a lieutenant.
Yeah.
And they were looking for, because I was sitting in essentially an 03 position, even though I was in an 03. And they were maybe looking for a position for that, which then triggered a domino for Ryan Bakey to come out as a platoon leader to be the XO, is my assumption.
Yeah. Do you remember what month you came to BCO?
I want to say it was around February of 2007.
It was. Okay. And I knew it was later. So Baron had wound up going from our XO to Alpha Company's XO.
Okay.
And so he was over as ACO's XO. And I believe that's where Bakey had moved up to Company XO. But that had shifted also later. I believe it had shifted because we lost yet another platoon leader. So I don't know if that's when he had went back down. So I'd probably have to connect that dot, but I do believe that the trigger that started the dominoes would be Baron moving over to ACO and that bringing things into focus for you. How'd you get the news you were coming to Bravo as a platoon leader?
Honestly, I'm assuming it probably came from one of the field grades, or probably maybe Captain Chapman, who had a funny story with me when I was a night battle captain one night when I was trying to have him secure a building that they had been taking fire from, and I just remember him coming in later and over the net, and basically he gave me a teaching point about, hey, what you see is not necessarily what it looks like on the ground, so allow the commander on the ground to make decisions. And it's something it wasn't said in that way. There might have been stuff about mustard and delivering food, but it was a great learning experience from a commander on the ground. But I can't remember if it was Captain Chapman or Colonel Goins, or again, either Major Seagraves or Major Posnick that informed me, but they said I was going to the line, so I started doing essentially a left seat, right seat with Ryan. He kind of walked me through what was going on with the platoon, what they were doing, strengths, weaknesses, things like that to prepare me.
How'd that go?
It was good. Good transition. Great group of NCOs, section sergeants, McKinney, Will, Martinez. It was obviously a great group of NCOs, squad leaders like Rojas, Fisher. I loved the experience of being their platoon leader. We obviously had some not great moments. Definitely some got to live what I'd been seeing for the first few months of the deployment and actually experience it firsthand, which was definitely different.
Yeah. And that's definitely, so as you're saying the names and certain things are coming back to me too, because, you mentioned Martinez, Rojas, and Ramiro, right? So they were part of the Lieutenant Moffett crew. So when Lieutenant Moffett had went to Alpha Company and Bakey had come up, it was like, okay, well, they had asked, okay, can we go down to the line unit now? We had enough of, the headquarters part. That was a deal. That was a deal that we had made, and it was cool. I mean, it was just one of those things that they were a great crew. You needed a good crew. It's like, actually, they were probably they were the XO's crew, right?
They were the best crew.
Yeah, there's no doubt. So you get down there, you do your right seat, left seat ride with Lieutenant Bakey. Now you're large and in charge out there doing ops as a mechanized platoon leader. Yep. What's some of the operations you started kicking off on?
So one of my first things, we obviously went out at the time, the Barrett's IP station. So he took me out there, but we were looking for a new outpost. So I remember Captain Chapman had changed command over to Captain Austin, and I was tasked with trying to find a location for what would be one of the next outposts. We looked at a location. It was a house that was just north of the IP station, but then there was also a school that was right across from the government center that we looked at, and that eventually became, I think we called Bone Disney.
Bone Disney
Became the new outpost. So that was one, being afforded that opportunity, new PL to the company, and I'm being charged with helping find one of our new strongholds, outposts.
What was some of the criteria that you guys were told for the outpost?
So one of the fields of view, so that, which you obviously know, but there was weak parts of that for Bone Disney, but also proximity to the population was another thing we were looking at. We didn't want to seem separated, but we also wanted to be able to see something coming.
Yeah.
So for Bone Disney, for most part, 75% of it, we had that standoff, but we were literally backed up almost on apartments.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, it's like everything that the Brits IP station was like what the new combat outpost shouldn't be, right? Because talking about the Brits IP station, not sure how much you probably. Well, let me ask you this: how much time did you spend out at the Brits IP station before we vacated that and went up into Bone Disney?
I would probably maybe a couple weeks. Definitely slept out there a few times on shifts as we rotated platoons in and out. Operated out of there a little bit before we got the new outpost.
You know, like I bring this up, and I think it helps bring things into context. It was like the Brits IP station was an absolute train wreck when it came to defendability, and to be able to do operations out of it. And it's like, well, that was never really meant to be a combat outpost. That was meant to be a police station. And when that had gotten overrun and War Dog element went in and secured it, and then we did a relief in place with them as they went on to do great things with route clearance. You know, we kind of got a hold of this terrain, and it wasn't very conducive for offensive operations, right? To launch offensive operations, the approach was absolutely like, it was really a no-go, because you had the canal that cut you off from, then you had like one bridge that you had to go over. It was always telegraphing your movements, and then the defendability with the palm groves, and you know, just it was a tough piece of terrain to hold. So I think knowing what we had there and coming up with the criteria for the new outpost as well was just like, okay, we know what we don't want, and you know, it closely mirrors everything that we had at the Brits IP station. So now that the Bone Disney outpost was templated as a option, when did that actually happen? Because I was on leave when Bravo Company actually went and occupied that outpost. So talk to me about that.
So everything was coordinated. We had EOD went in, checked the building. Again, it was a vacated school. Didn't know if anything, because we had been going there a few times. So kind of, you talked about telegraphing. I'm sure people watching knew that, hey, something's about to happen here. So they cleared the building. I don't remember the time, but I do remember that there was a Iraq soccer game that day, because there was celebratory fire because they defeated whoever they were playing. And I just remember hearing rounds like hit the vehicles as in the tracks as we're sitting out there securing the building, going in. Because if you remember, obviously no HESCOs up around the time. we had to keep folks out in the Bradleys and tracks to provide security until the engineers were able to put those initial set of obstacles up and protective barriers, HESCOs and T-walls and everything else that had to be brought in. And then also creating the obstacles on the main avenues of approach so that vehicles couldn't, high-speed vehicle-borne IEDs couldn't run into the building also.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the fortification that went in was pretty impressive. And it happened relatively quick, right?
It did.
And I think that was something that took the neighborhood by surprise as well, because it was like, okay, I think they're used to Americans coming in and kind of strong point and maybe doing some operations for a day or two and leaving. But that wasn't the case with this new cop, right?
Yes.
Did we simultaneously maintain Barrett's IP station as the new cop was being built?
Memory's a little fuzzy. I know we didn't give it up. I can't remember if it was turned back over to the IP and they controlled it or if we kept a small footprint. I know once Bone Disney opened up, I don't remember going back to the Barrett's IP station, but I know we didn't just vacate the premise either.
Yeah, I recall a small footprint at the Barrett's IP station. I wasn't sure if you guys had went back or not, because we did have the IA as well, right? I think it was a Kurd unit that come down and started nesting with Bravo Company. And that was another thing with that big building. It not only had to house Bravo Company, but we also had to have a place for the Iraqi Army unit as well, right?
Yep. That entire southern wing of the building was where the IAs were.
Yeah. I think the other beauty of that was it was mutually supporting with the government center. And I think that was a good thing. And then the routes in and out, it didn't take much effort to get onto the MSR, the main supply route, and either get to Gabe for logistical operations or medical evac or back to Warhorse, right? So as you get down into your platoon, did you guys mix it up with the enemy much?
Oh, we did have a few engagements. So I think we were looking for a counterfeiter. We were given intelligence that he was in one of the houses. We did a typical cordon and search, started going door to door. And this was early in my time as a lieutenant and as a PL. Sorry, not lieutenant, and that was the day Castillo took the round that went around his head, and that was It's amazing that he was hit. I wish he wasn't hit, but the fact that he was hit in the head and survived, because on the ground with Dr. Vries taking care of him and seeing the blood, it was just amazing that we didn't lose him that day.
Yeah. Was that a precision small arms, or did just somebody open up with a machine gun and he caught one?
No, so I'm trying to go back and remember. So we're going door to door. We knew our target building was coming up. We started receiving small arms fire. Bradley's engaged. Small arms fire stopped. I remember sending one of the squads up to clear the building, and as they were approaching, they started taking small arms fire from a different direction. And I don't think it was machine gun or precision sniper or anything. I think it's unlucky round hit him in the helmet, went around his skull, and luckily again. But we did, as you said, quick evac routes, because that area was just a grid. 41st, 42nd, so on, Alpha Bravo Charlie. We got him up to the MSR, got him over to Fog Gabe, got him evac'd very quickly. So
yeah, now that actually went into his forehead, right? The round.
Yeah.
And then from my understanding, it went between the skin and the skull and went out the backside.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
Again, and the not knowing. for like the first, because once he was on the bird, we have no clue what's going to happen to him. But again, Dr. Vries, great medic.
Yes.
So.
Great medic. Did you guys continue ops?
We did. We ran several other, again, clearing, and it became more the area became less contested. And I don't know at what point the decision was made. But again, I got the opportunity to go up to the northern area when Charlie 573rd got attached. So we went up there with them. Can't remember the commander's name. And the same thing, helped them set up an outpost. They picked a location that I strongly recommended against. Kind of like the Brits IP station. There weren't a lot of ways to get in and out, and they were literally on top of the populace. So some of the criteria we had used in terms of standoff, we didn't use there, and then obviously that resulted in an incident later. But worked with them with some patrols, and then I got reassigned again to go up to Zaganea with Captain Few, and was attached to his folks. That was an interesting time up there, and I think that's around the time when we had platoon sergeants switch out. So it went from having Hamilton to Lane, which I think really changed the dynamic of the platoon at the time. And it was a great experience being up there and working with 573rd out of 82nd, but it was also, we were in close proximity to Bone Disney. We still monitored the radios, even though we were working for a different commander at the time. And then just hearing some of the incidents that occurred and wanting to go back down and support our company, we weren't able to at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it was a different world up in Zaganea versus what was happening down in Bakuba and Baritz area, right? We were, you hear about that School of Hard Knocks, what was happening in Baritz and Bakuba and Tahrir area, for you guys to have that awareness and then to go up to Zaganea and start, supporting those guys, I think was a benefit to you all. What kind of operations did you do with the 573rd up there?
It was a lot of just going through clearing, looking for caches, searching palm groves based off of intelligence coming down from Colonel Pappas and his element. Yeah. And that's what a lot of it. We also did a lot of small OPs, basically overwatching roads, making sure no one was putting in IEDs. So I'd send out a fire team, go out with them. We'd insert, do feints with the Bradleys, make it seem like we're just doing a patrol, but really dismounting OPs to stay out there for a couple days, just overwatching. Did those guys, did you feel like they used the Bradleys and infantry to their maximum potential, or did you have to was that something like you had to kind of coach them on? Because I know I did a little bit of coaching with them as far as because they don't know if they're not used to utilizing it, no. they don't know what they don't know, right? Yeah, so they didn't really know, and they did have their own Bradley that just sat there in the compound. So at one point I just said, hey, can I use this as a fifth track in my rotation? And so we did. But we worked really well with Cam Few, kind of employing them strong point in Bradleys when they were doing dismounted operations to provide that firepower. Because again, but they did also use us a lot for just mounted OPs, sitting there for a day, just observing, seeing if anything was going on, using the thermals. Yeah, and I think that's one of those things that helps with the Joint Readiness Training Center, right? Like with the pre-deployment is if you were afforded that opportunity to go and get cross-attached to a tank unit or a light unit or, some other, it's like it gives you that opportunity to hone those skills to kind of lead up, right? Like, hey, you guys have us, this is what we could do for you, right? And I'm sure you did it. I have no doubt you did it, but nonetheless, being able to hone that craft of maximizing your capabilities for that unit
that you're embedded with is I think invaluable, really. So 573 Zaganea operations, and you guys were mixing it up pretty good, at least being aggressive, right? It wasn't like you were just sitting out there on static OP all the time, and that was one of the things that I thought was pretty amazing, because you do have your dismounts, right, and you're out there doing small kill teams and inserting and overwatching with Bradleys, and you guys are like. The Bradleys, like the QRF aspect, right? Like Big Brother, and being able to, one, internally support your operations, but also 573, right? Like, hey, we have this asset in area, and that kind of gives them the ability to do a little bit more as well. So, how long were you guys up in Zaganea?
Man, you keep asking me the times. I wish I had marked all this out. I honestly couldn't have been maybe a month or so, I would think.
I think it was about
then
so, yeah.
When I came back down, then came back down to Bone Disney, spent a few more months as a PL. We did the big operation to clear the entire city. Not the entire city, sorry. That entire portion, obviously the day that we got hit with the deep buried IED.
Had the troop surge happened while you were up in Zaganea?
Trying to think when 520th came. I think that was right around when it was starting, and when 520th came in. But when I came back down to Bone Disney, yes, the troop surge was in full effect.
It was 520. Did we already have the Shadow platoon? And
yeah,
we did. Okay.
I think it was while I was in Zaganea, because there were faces I didn't recognize when I came back, and they had already started integrating and working with you and Cam Austin.
Yeah, that was, and it was great to have you guys come back too, because we were starting to feel whole again. Have you guys come back? Of course, we had our tank platoon, who was they were part of us, and then that would have been Blue Platoon with PJ and Sergeant Reynolds as well. So when you guys came back, what was the environment then compared to when you left to go up to Zaganea?
I think it was again not as contentious as it was early on as my time as a platoon leader, but there was still definitely pockets of insurgency throughout, which is why we did that large scale operation to try to root out any last remnants of enemy that was in the area.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about like the day in the life of Red Platoon, right? So you guys, first off, you mentioned some all-star players, right? Albrizi, Apprecio. Trying to remember who his gunner was. Was it
I can see his curly brownish hair. Yeah. I can see his face right now.
Yeah, those guys, that Bradley, that crew. How many IEDs do you think that crew absorbed during their time?
So, and I think when I became the expert, that was probably the one track I think that, for whatever reason, just kept going. All the other my track, like the first time before I went up to Zaganea, I don't know if you remember this, and I was out there with Sergeant Vashon Bolton was the other track, and we're just going down the road, don't see anything, and then just like that. And I remember the engine block about 15 feet down the road. Romero Martinez and I, we get out. We go provide overwatch on top of a rooftop while we obviously have to wait for recovery assets, which you never want to do. And I can't remember if it was, I think maybe Bakey came out with the recovery assets, or it might have been you. But before, Will's track, they for whatever reason kept going. And then
That was your track that got blown up and had the engine block launched, and
Yep.
yeah.
And I remember Vashawn, he said you jumped out of the hatch like Spider-Man and started looking, because again, we didn't see anything. Like, there was no, typically, you kind of see a hot spot on the road or something, and it was at night, so it would show up clearer, but for whatever reason, we just missed that one.
The your platoon, I mean, all the platoons took their fair share of IEDs. I remember going up, it was in old Bakuba, and Sergeant Lane was in front, and I was in the back track. I think it was one of them tracks that we acquired from the 82nd, where, because I wasn't going to drive around the city in a Humvee. That wasn't happening. And we were going up, and we were doing a recovery mission to a vehicle that had been broke down, but it was outside one of the combat outposts up in Old Baqubah. And it's like one of those areas where you just know something bad's going to happen, but you have no option but to go. And I remember being on the mic and, talking to Sergeant Lane and his guys, and it was like, hey, just keep your head on a swivel. And like swiv was coming out of my mouth, and his Bradley just like erupts in a big like fireball. See the antennas shaking, and they lose comms. It was yeah, and to Sergeant Lane's credit, the comms came back up. They started the vehicle, and continued mission. But first platoon definitely absorbed quite amount of IEDs, and that. What was that? Your 1-2 crew, 1-1 crew.
Which
I'm sorry, Albreezy's crew.
So he was 1-1. He was Alpha, and then, well, now I'm trying to remember. So I was 1-6, obviously. He was the section. He was my
he was 1-1,
track, and then McKinney was with Platoon Sergeant.
Yeah. Was that the only ID you got hit with personally?
I've had some very close ones. I was right behind. It was Corporal Singh, and I can't remember who else was in the track, and they hit it, not us. On a QRF mission, I thought I got hit by an IED, but it actually hit an IP truck. But it was kind of the same situation. It was a large explosion, lost all comms, couldn't see anything. Our track went dead for a second. But that was not actually, it didn't actually hit us directly. It hit a IP truck that had gone by. But aside from the time the engine block got blown, that was the only direct hit on my vehicle.
Wow.
While I was in it.
Dismount ops. You were no stranger to the ground either, right? Like mount it, dismount it. As the clearing ops were coming in, and we started rotating in and out of the combat outposts, going, because it was about a 3 or 4 day rotation out the outpost, and then you go back to Warhorse.
For like 2 days, or I think refit 2 or 3 days.
And then go back out, right?
Yeah.
What were some of the patrols like on the ground in Bakuba?
It was...
Or Tahrir.
Yeah, it was Bakuba. Really, we would go out, we'd just patrol up and down the street, and typically, for the most part, the small arms fire kind of started slowing down. We weren't seeing as many IEDs until obviously in May, when the big operation kind of changed for that day, but we weren't really seeing much contact anymore. So in my mind, not that I was getting complacent, I was like, well, maybe we've turned this corner, and we've really, after months of fighting, pushed the enemy out of the area.
Yeah. When you guys were patrolling, what kind of things were you doing? Were you engaging with any of the civilian population? Were you getting caches? Were you doing any joint patrols with the Iraqi army?
I think
Most of our patrols we did with the Iraqi army. As you said, they were right there in the center. We'd go through. We typically didn't say where we were going ahead of time, just to be cautious. But we would typically pull in a team, a squad, with the squad, because that's about as big as we would typically patrol. On the dismounts, we were engaging with the local populace. We did see the local population was starting to come out more, which again made me think that maybe things were turning the corner. Didn't find many caches. We did find a few, some intel from, again, battalions saying, hey, these areas, this is kind of what we're seeing. Weapons caches, a few, but for the most part, in the city itself, no. We did do that one Palm Grove trek that one time with 520th when they picked us up. Walked through the Palm Groves all night, and we did find, wasn't that big of a cache, but a few weapons, grenades. But yeah, it seemed to almost be quieting down a little bit. So
Yeah. Were the Iraqi civilians, were they cooperating when you would talk to them? Were they, um, you know, did you feel like they were being like forthcoming with information or about, what was bothering them? Like, was it the insurgents? Was it lack of food, lack of school, lack of security?
I think it was a combination of those things. And as we continued to be there, and obviously when we started to transition into having the locals help police themselves, but I think it was just they wanted their normalcy back, and they didn't have that again. And you remember we had a great interpreter, Snake, who was always there, and he would kind of tell it to you as he saw it, like, hey, they're being genuine, or hey, look, you might want to kind of take what this individual is saying with a grain of salt. So.
Yeah. 520. So we had 520 scouts on the ground with us. We had 520 mortars on the ground with us for a while. Were you on the ground when Captain Jensen was hit?
I was not.
You weren't? Okay. The combat patrols out in and around Cop Adam, and then the patrols up into Old Bakuba, because we were mutually supporting 520, and then eventually 520 pulled out, and then we had Old Bakuba as well, right? Ooh, that was still a lot of space, not a lot of terrain. What were some of your challenges as a platoon leader coming in with one meeting and linking up with your platoon, and being attached to Zaganea, and up to this point, what were some of the things that you found challenging as a young platoon leader at the time?
Well, to be honest, one of my biggest challenges, which is kind of contrary to what I was always told and everything, was with my first platoon sergeant. He and I didn't always see eye to eye. I don't know if you know all the details of the friction that he and I had. I respected him. He was an NCO, but he wasn't the right NCO for the time and for what we were doing. There were several things of how do I, as a wet behind the ears lieutenant, talk to this NCO who's had multiple deployments. He was with them when they deployed the last time, in a manner that's not disruptive to the platoon. Right. So I had to kind of, and I would talk to Ryan about, like, hey, he was your previous platoon sergeant, like, how do I deal with this now that you're also the XO? And eventually it worked itself out for the platoon. Lane came in as the next platoon sergeant. So that was probably one of the hardest things. And then again, it was just making sure the guys stay engaged, stayed vigilant. Coming back when we're on Warhorse, always going to the mechanics, sitting in the motor pool, making sure our tracks were good to go.
The motor pool, right? Like the system. I think that's one of the things, especially when you become the XO, right? Like, how do you keep the machine running? and something like the maintenance on those vehicles, because those Bradleys are lifeline out in the field, right? And how do you keep those to a high state of mission readiness? And that's never a small task, especially with that high operational tempo of the way we were operating out there. But you also had Sergeant Lane then, right? Who was phenomenal.
Yes.
And I couldn't have asked for a better platoon sergeant to push down to you guys, at least in my opinion. I thought he was just the great man for the right time. Which, the wrong man for the beginning. And I didn't know what all those the intricacies of what was happening with that platoon leader, platoon sergeant relationship. But when it did finally work itself out, yeah, maybe there were some misses there, but at the same time, you put your faith in the platoon sergeants to be doing the right thing for the platoon and the mission, and sometimes that gets lost. And very, very unfortunate, but I think we made up for ground with Sergeant Lane. And so you guys come back down, and things are starting to, because we've done several different clearing operations, right? These IEDs that are getting put in, what's your opinion on it? Do you think a lot of those IEDs were put in while we were out inside that area? Do you think some of these, or a lot of these IEDs were IEDs that were put in months, if not years in advance?
I 100% think it's a combination of both. The ones that we were typically able to see and defeat, those were probably in our time there, but there were definitely some IEDs. The one on 18 May, I talked to the SF guys, and they're like, yep, intel says this was put in here months before y'all got here. Deep buried, there was no way you could have known it was there. We had literally driven over that spot dozens of times. And that was just the one day that someone was watching, connected whatever, and detonated it.
So let's talk about that day. That was a pretty big operation. What was your platoon task to do that day?
So the operation was obviously we were clearing that entire portion of the cities. Can't remember if it went 41 to 42, but east to west, Red Platoon, we were clearing the northern band of that area. I remember we had wanted to go west to east, because kind of like you had talked about with the Brits IP station, like so many times, like they see patterns, and for something of that scale, I think this was my first clearing operation with the full company. Everything else had typically been platoon level.
Yeah.
And I remember I was hesitant. I remember going to both the company leadership and saying, hey, what if we went from Gabe the night before, switched it up, and then tried to do a east to west. But we did west to east. We started clearing. I think we got through the first two streets, and we were on that last north-south running street.
So you guys had Bradley's overwatching the dismounts,
yes.
And the dismounts were essentially, if I'm not mistaken, your platoon was on the north side of the road, or at least we had two different dismounted elements from first and third, or was Shadow on the ground? Who else was on the ground with you guys that day?
I think it was, so on our street, it was just us. Cam Austin, I think he was on the east-west running street that was south block, and then there was another element further south from him. And it was all phased and timed. We wouldn't cross over to the next set of blocks until everyone had cleared their section. So operation of that size, I'm the platoon leader. I'm going with the dismounts. And the tracks, as you said, they were strong pointing those intersections, providing overwatch, suppressive fire, and we were receiving some small arms fire as we were going west to east.
Yeah.
But nothing significant. Bradleys were able to engage, destroy some of the enemy. And then when it came to that final stretch of, I think it was, like Avenue, was it D? That didn't quite go the full length. It was a little bit shorter block. They came to that intersection just, what was it, southwest of the school, the university. My track with Sar Martinez, Romero, and Nash hit that deep buried IED.
It was a massive IED.
Yeah.
From my understanding, like they were getting put in position due to like enemy contact with the dismounts, right? Like they were pushing in to secure that section to obviously do what they needed to do, was to engage and destroy an enemy to keep the dismounts to allow them to maneuver, right? That intersection, like a deep buried IED, like you said, you've driven over that. I've driven over that. When you talk about, I am pretty certain we've done multiple route clearance operations through that intersection. And it's just one of those things that deep buried, it was so deep that ground penetrating radar didn't pick up, and there was so much explosives. Like that hole was massive.
It was.
And that was command deck, right? And I think you guys traced that wire back to a building where it was just like a pigtail. Was there still a detonator there?
I wasn't the one that actually traced it. I don't think there was.
There was a lot going on. That's for sure. It was still like early morning too.
It was.
What time did you guys roll out? Was it like 3, 4 o'clock? Because it was starting to get hot, right? So that was one of those things where, obviously the cover of darkness gives us some security too, but the temperature, it's just starting to heat up there as well. Do you recall, like?
I don't, but it was, as you know, it was a long day.
Yeah. That was a horrific day. You guys still continued mission?
Kind of. I know, obviously. So I can walk you exactly to where I was when I heard the explosion. We were heading south. We're on that southwest corner. Lynn and I were continuing to clear buildings. There was a little clinic on that corner. And we hear the explosion. We can't see it at this time because we're behind buildings. And I guess Cam Austin could see it from where he was a street down. I guess he had a clear line of sight up the street. And I just remember we all stop, turn the platoon around, go back, secure the site. And that's when I think like all the additional assets, SF showed up. More people that were part of the operation showed up for that one.
Yeah, that was, and you're right. And that was the beauty. Yeah, I loved having the relationship with the ODAs that were out there, because when things like that happened, they showed up too, right? It was like, there was a joint ownership of that area. They didn't have to come out. So does somebody call you on a radio and tell you what happened? Or did you just start moving to where the explosion was to figure things out?
Combination of both.
Okay.
And again, we were probably less than 50 meters. We were just behind a building, so we couldn't see it. I think Pedro McKinney was probably the first one on internal comms that was saying it, and then I was also hearing it from Cam Austin on CompanyNet.
I know, like, I got, and being back at the outpost, like, you want the situation to develop, right? But you, like, we hear this because you guys weren't that far away. I mean, it was just a, I don't know, block and a half, 2 blocks. And you hear that explosion, and then it feels like an eternity before, like, you get the report, but you know it's not going to be good. And I remember, like, not being able to wrap my mind around it because I'm not on the ground. And I called Bone 6 and I'm like, hey, what do we need? Recovery assets? Do we need an 88? And he didn't say, hey, Bone 6. He said, First Sergeant. There's nothing to hook the 88 to. I was like, damn.
Yeah.
How do you lead through that?
Like I said, the track stayed in the fight. The dismounts, I think and I never asked them, but I think the most important thing for us at that time was to just secure the remains.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. We didn't clear much after that. It was making sure that any remains that we could get were secured.
So you guys do what you have to do. You get the remains. We evac them, and 3rd platoon. Damn. I remember. Yeah. Like, how do you keep people focused? How do you keep people motivated? And after the recovery operations and after the operations is done, you're back at Cop Adam. You're looking at your platoon sergeant. How did you and Sergeant Lane lead through it after that?
I've never thought about it. I think I'd like to think we had a very close-knit relationship, even though I'd not been there very long. My relationship with the NCOs, with the soldiers in Red Platoon, and the name that we were told not to use as a platoon call sign. I don't know if you remember that one.
I do.
But I think kind of having that togetherness and closeness is probably what allowed us to keep moving forward.
Yeah. You know, what you did up in Zaganea, and like, to do what you guys did prior to that, paid dividends. Was it forged in fire? Sure, absolutely. You know, the platoon sergeant, platoon leader relationship and how you operated with the section sergeants and the dismounted squad leaders and the things that Sergeant Lane brought to the fight with his experience and his, willingness to just do everything that the platoon was doing, right? And same as you, to put yourselves in harm's way each and every day up to that point, I think really helped pay and carry you guys through that hard time when you guys lost that crew. Sergeant Williams, all the NCOs, right? Like everyone is doing what they need to do to keep their piece of the pie up and moving, right? Their piece of responsibility. I don't wish that on anyone to have to lead through something like that. But you guys did, and it wasn't like the war ended the next day. We still had a lot of business to handle, right? Moving forward. And you guys did a masterful job of keeping your platoon together and keeping them focused and continuing the mission until, because again, we still had a fight on our hands, right? Yeah. And to get people in tracks after that in the city and move down them roads, the bravery that it takes, the intestinal fortitude, the leadership, like all of the things that you hear about and learn about in school and leadership classes, like that's very taxing. But you guys did it. Yeah. So after that, what other operations did you guys have going on that stick out in your mind?
I think after that, I think nothing else. I don't remember any other big operations like that. The typical patrolling, clearing through routes and everything. Vaguely remember, and I think it was after that we went through the university. And that area that had kind of been left untouched for a while. And then probably can't remember the exact timing. Page opened up for me, and I was assigned as the company XO.
Did Bakey come back down to the platoon? What happened there?
It was. I'm trying to remember. I don't think it was Bakey. It was. I can't remember who took a platoon after me.
Interesting. I'm drawing a blank. We'll have to edit that out, but dang. That shows what kind of wild ride that was. Like, I'm the first sergeant, you're the PL. Neither one of us can recall who had come in and because I know. So Bakey was the XO. The Jersey barrier, T barrier, like when we started like just completely isolating sections of the city, I remember that being a huge undertaking. And I mean, you, Blue Platoon, and Headquarters Platoon, right? It was just like an all hands on deck to get all those barriers out there and get the area locked down, control who was coming in and out of that area. But yeah, that's interesting. So you redeployed from the company as the company XO?
I did.
How was that?
So Company XO was, again, it was another, not the experience I wanted, but a very good experience to kind of learn from. So working there, obviously with the S4s, our supply sergeant Sergeant Martinez, and the team spent a lot more time in the motor pool once I was the XO. Because as you kind of said, when I was the PL, really just focused on my equities, but now as the XO, I'm looking across the entire formation, making sure you and Cam Austin are good to go. That's when I started to learn more about the other platoons, because again, we had done rips at the station, or not the station, at Bone Disney, but never really sat and talked to the leadership from some of the other platoons, so had that more. And that was also the time when we started with the whole civil affairs push of working with the locals to police themselves.
Yeah.
And doing the whole IEDs and road guard vests and having them police the town. So, and I got to be the conduit, as they call me, I was the money man, because they knew that I was the one that had to come down and pay them on whatever that cycle was, because I'd go to the civil affairs person, he'd hand me the money and say, this is the roster of people that you need to pay. And remember, they'd come and line up.
I do.
And I would sit there at a table and hand out their salaries for what they were doing.
Yeah, there's some gamesmanship with that roster. Yeah, that was some interesting times, but you know what? That was our ticket out. How did it feel like did it feel like 1 minute we were fighting them and next minute we were fighting with them?
It did.
How did that go down? How was that received?
It's kind of weird, and because what was it, 1920th Revolutionary Brigade?
Yeah.
And it was, couldn't know it for a fact, but pretty certain that some of the folks that we were now paying to help protect the area were people that were probably firing at us and placing IEDs months prior to. But obviously at this time in the overarching deployment, we had been extended. We got to go through the surge. I think everyone would say, wait, we would rather take that than to continue this dogfight that we had been going through the previous few months.
Yeah, it's you have to put your personal feelings aside, right? And I think that's something Captain Austin and I both struggled with. Like when we had that meeting at Cop Adam, we had all these guys come in, and it was just one of those things, like there was no doubt, like these were the dudes that we were fighting since Barrett's, and but when we did make that relationship and deal to partner, and we did that huge clearing operation up in the north, it was like a light switch flipped. They brought back a lot of detainees, and we processed them. But from that day forward, it just felt like we definitely turned the corner then, right? And people were coming out and turning in IEDs, because wasn't there a bounty for like IEDs?
I believe so.
that we paid people, and then it's like, wait a minute, we can't have people walking around the town with IEDs and wheelbarrows trying to get money. But they were bringing up all sorts of different things to and around the patrols to help us. And I specifically remember doing a patrol, and I think it was when we did an operation, and we were coming from the college area, the campus area. It's tech school now. I remember on Charlie Avenue, through one of the interpreters, having somebody, they pointed out an IED, and then they started telling us that IEDs were being put in months in advance before we ever even got there. And to the point where one part of that translation that I received in that conversation was that road crews were out there using like trucks and heavy equipment and the word jackhammer, like they were jackhammering up the road to put these massive bombs in. And it's like that certainly didn't happen when we were out there because, like you said, I think the smaller ones that were hit maybe not as devastating, but some of these other IEDs were put in well in advance, and they were very sophisticated and very big.
Yeah.
So, getting information like that, things that people weren't willingly sharing previously, now that we had earned the populace's trust. And I think that was a big thing. Like when we were in there and we were doing those operations and we put things on lockdown and we finally eradicated the enemy through there and we were staying. And there was an Iraqi partnership with the population, with security. It was just opening up lines of communication where they were willing to share more of that information with us. The infrastructure. So you were in charge of the projects too, right? Like getting dump trucks in, fixing water mains, getting electricity. That must have been pretty exciting.
Yeah, and again, it's from going back to PSD. We don't even go into these parts of the town. And going to my earlier comment, people wanted their normalcy back. We started to see that, and ultimately that's kind of what we were there for. We weren't there to just constantly be fighting. We were there to help stabilize the area as well. So it was good to see that.
Yeah,
15 months, we were starting to meet that end state of what we went there for.
and I think that's the beauty of 112. We saw that go from one environment that was, I think, infiltrated with Al Qaeda in the backdrop, right? I think they were pulling a lot of the strings. It wasn't a super kinetic environment. People were going about their daily lives, but I do think that there was I think there was a major influence of an outside entity that the local population didn't want to deal with, right? And then we go into this slow but steady transition from a non-permissive or permissive environment to a semi-non-permissive environment to straight kinetic operations to the troop surge where the city is really ghost town. Like the only people that are there out on the streets are us and the enemy. To, seeing the effort of electricity, schools opening up, shops opening up, traffic coming back, people talking, and a fledgling government start to stand up as well. So, for 112 to be there that whole 15 months, I think one is important. Like what we're doing right now is we're the ones that had that full snapshot from beginning to end. Everybody else that came in just had these small snapshots. And I think a lot of the people that came in with the troop surge may or may not know how successful that was, because really they came in, handled business, and they left and redeployed, rightly so, because they were on a 14, 15-month deployment. So you sharing that, I think, is a pretty good thing with regard to the different efforts. Was there any other monumental wins when it came to the city coming back to some sort of normalcy?
No, again, I think it was just I remember, and I can't remember their names, because remember it was two guys that were kind of the head of the 1928th who we're now working with. One was kind of the skinnier and one was the balder, more heavy set. But the skinnier guy, he just made the comment. He was like, "You can walk in these streets without a weapon now. You guys are good." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I appreciate that. I won't do that, but I appreciate the sentiment. So
Yeah. And that's true because it was, I, when we were ripping with the unit that came in to replace us, and I to this day, I can't even tell you what division it was, let alone what battalion it was. But the, them coming through, like it didn't equate, like it they would see all the devastation, the destruction, like it was hell on earth when you drove down Charlie Avenue or 41st or, you know, pretty much any other road with inside Tahrir, and looking at the buildings and just the destruction, but also to see, you know, the shops open and the kids going to school and, you know, all the signs of life coming back. It was kind of like one of those things that it was hard to connect the dots, and no matter how much we told them, uh, you know, but the great thing is we knew we were handing over to the next unit something that we could be very proud of. You know, they were going to be able to just take it to the next level of recovering that whole area versus going through what we went through.
Yeah.
So you redeployed a company as the XO. What about homecoming? How was your homecoming?
Uneventful. So unlike a lot of the service members, as I said, from New York. So Texas is not where my family is. Was single at the time I deployed, single when I came back. So it was really just go get my stuff out of storage. I remember my vehicle that was in storage,
The old Acura.
wasn't running. Cindy wasn't running, and I had to reach out to Hepler to
Chad Hepler, nice.
and him and his wife came and like got me to my apartment while I figured out like how do I get this car moving and towed and working again, because 15 months just sitting there in a storage lot just wasn't ready to go. So, but relatively uneventful. Came back. Everyone starts getting there. Hey, we had a lot of guys that went the recruiting route, like Mac. You started to see kind of like what you said at the beginning. It's kind of the turnover.
Yeah.
The officers were getting offered like, hey, extension bonuses, assignment picks, school picks to stay, and we're already hearing that hey, 112th is getting ready to like we're in the pipeline to go back again, and
It's like, dang.
it's just like, man, we just got back and you're already talking about going back. So,
Yeah.
but really, didn't I think that's again 18 May always be in my mind. It's on my body, in my heart, my soul. It was a rough day. Made me question what I wanted to do as an officer. But for whatever, I made a decision that was going to be it for me in active duty. And then joined the Army National Guard after that. So.
Wow. When you detached from 112, so you didn't go on that second deployment with them?
No, I stayed close even though I was no longer with the unit. So Jeremy Duplichin and I he allowed me to live with him. He had a house over there in Harker Heights. I lived with him, took care of his house while he deployed. So kind of stayed connected with the unit. But I didn't go with them.
Yeah, I didn't realize it at the time when, you know, you give up your diamond and Sergeant Sinicero's great non-commissioned officer took over the company. That wasn't a concern. And like I said, I didn't know it at the time. I was just like, okay, I'm going to my next duty assignment, University of Central Florida. But being pulled away from all the guys that you serve with for 15 months, and having that common bond, uh, quickly became one of those things where I was a fish out of water at University of Central Florida. You know, it's like 5 months removed from Bakuba, and at this beautiful campus training cadets. And there was some adjustment. There was a lot of adjustment with that new position. Did you find a transition to be challenging?
Not so much. Again, I think for me it was probably a lot easier because I didn't have many things tied to me at the time. Wasn't married at the time. I didn't have kids, so it was just me. And then again, getting to live with like Dupe and I were roommates in Bakuba, and now we're roommates. Some of that maybe kind of helped with that. Like there was still some familiarity with it. Still hung out with Joey Sparks and some of those guys when we came back. So even though I wasn't in the unit anymore, still maintained some of those ties. So unlike you who got uprooted and sent halfway across the country, I was still right here, just I wasn't with the unit anymore.
What's your big takeaway out of Bakuba? Big lesson learned.
As an individual, I think it was kind of like we just talked through. I had three very different perspectives of what the battalion went through. As a staff officer, seeing it bird's eye view, kind of literally, not being there, living it on the ground, and then being an executive officer on this when we moved into stabilization operations. Just it was a unique perspective. Like you said, everyone obviously has their own story and their whole way. But again, I go back to as much as I've done a poor job, because that's just the kind of person, I'm an introvert by nature, but the brotherhood of what we had there, I think, is just one of those things. And we didn't talk about it, but when I went to be in an XO, one of my closest brothers out of that deployment ended up being my gunner, Juan de Jesus, and to this day, it's kind of like extended family. I've stayed here in Texas. He's essentially the brother I don't have because I only have a sister. His family, his parents have on numerous occasions had me over for holiday, Thanksgivings, Christmas. Because again, when you're a transplant, far from your family, which my family now lives in Florida, and you can't always get back to them, it's kind of nice having that connection.
Yeah. It is. Sergeant Williams. Tragic.
Was.
From what I was told, he died in a motorcycle accident within like months of us redeploying. I think I just showed up at UCF, and I forget who reached out. There might have been Sergeant Lane. But somebody had reached out to me and told me he was killed. Yeah. That like great NCO, fearless, did everything and then some anybody could ask one to do, right? Yeah. Just I don't know. I just want to give him a shout out, man, because great American.
Yeah.
What about people that might be struggling? What leadership advice do you have to give somebody who might be still struggling with deployments and loss and just war?
So, and again, everyone deals with things differently. I like to honor. I'm sure you've seen every year. I might miss it by a day or so. I might be somewhere where I can't, but I like to obviously recognize, as you see in this room behind us, all those that have fallen. in that conflict, and then you see others from this unit, and just remembering them, what they sacrificed. You probably don't want to hear this, but like the times we had in the track where at the time as a young lieutenant, we may or may not be in the track with probably unauthorized technological devices to make the time pass, talking to each other about their families. It's just 18 May was a terrible day, but there was so many brighter days with those guys. And try not to focus on the bad, but the good that we had.
Yeah, and hopefully, you'd never want to forget the bad, but hopefully over time, the good starts to take more of a presence in our thoughts and in our memories than the bad. Leadership, you're a great leader. That young man or woman that's on the fence or wanting to, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the military, but they have that drive to be leadership, like to be a leader, to serve. What advice would you like to give them?
I'll say, first of all, there's no greater experience or opportunity than being able to serve others. Like I said at the onset, I didn't know what the service would be when I was younger in high school growing up, but I knew I wanted to serve. You don't know what path it's going to take you on, but it's one that I'd walk 1,000 more times. Even with those dark times, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. And it's just if it's something you truly feel in your heart of hearts, and God blesses you to go on that route, it's just take the path, as difficult as it may be.
Comments?
No, again, like I said off camera, and I might have mentioned at the beginning, though, what you've done, I think, for telling our story, keeping us together, it's amazing. I don't know if this is in any other unit you would necessarily have it. Do you remember when we butted heads? We'll put that story in there. Do you remember that at all?
No, but I'm sure as soon as you start talking about it, hey, and I'm okay, because I'm sure there's a great lesson learned in it for both of us, maybe.
And it was for me. Early, can't remember if it was before or after I came back from Zaganea, but Colonel Goins and Sergeant Major Harris came out to the OP to Disney, probably before I went up to Zaganea, and we had just gotten a new soldier straight from the U.S. just got assigned to the unit, and he's in his OP. And remember, we used to have the trays with the maps, and rightfully so, brand new, like, to the area. It's either Colonel Goins or Command Sergeant Major asked him, like, what direction are you facing? And he just blanked.
Yeah.
05, and he just blanked. And I remember you, rightfully so, as the first sergeant, got with myself, and Fisher was the acting platoon sergeant at the time, and it was just like, how do you not remember? No, like, you got to do a brief when you're relieving someone. You got to know which direction you're facing. And I just remember Fisher and I, like, we 100% agreed with you, but we didn't want to do it in the OP. And I just remember I had to go see the man on a carpet. Unfortunately, Fisher did as well. It didn't end as well for him. You remember he got assigned to the scouts after that. But Cam Austin did pull me aside afterwards, and he did say, like, hey, first sergeant's an extension of me. Like, if the first sergeant's saying something, whether you agree or not, again, junior lieutenant, don't know better. He was like, you need to understand the first sergeant speaks for the commander when the commander's not there. And I took that to heart for the rest of my career, and Fisher did great with the scouts and the snipers, I think. But I do remember that was one of those issues that I always respected the NCOs, the NCO Corps. You're probably like, I don't remember that. You were just a lieutenant, blip on my radar. But
I'm really struggling to remember that.
but you had the right mindset of what we needed to be doing to make sure that not just the platoon leaders, squad leaders, and everyone, but everyone in the platoon understand how to defend our position.
Yeah. There's a lot at stake, right?
It was, and in hindsight, I fully understand it. Would I have acted the same way? Probably, because I was a young lieutenant that didn't know better. But it gave me a lesson to take with me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm gonna have to ponder that one for a little bit longer because Fish was a great guy.
He was.
Yeah.
He was the interim platoon sergeant between Hamilton and Lane. Because if you don't remember, like before Lane came over to us, that's who y'all had picked, essentially, to be the acting platoon sergeant.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in my head right now. Any other thoughts?
Hundreds of thoughts probably, but no, this is really glad you're doing this. So.
Me too. Well, sir, I think this completes your debrief, and I appreciate you. The Army is absolutely a better Army having you in it. I'm a better person having you be part of my life in a very challenging time, and glad we're still connected. And I live in Florida, so if you're ever on the east side of Florida, welcome head south.
Okay.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.